Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Day, and I am the Heart Smiles guest speaker coordinator. And today I've got the pleasure of speaking to Jane Bissler. As well as being the guest speaker coordinator, I'm also part of the Loving Hearts Connections group, and Jane is an central part of that group. Before I read Jane's bio, if I can just talk to you about how we're going to organise questions. So if, as we're going along, you want to put questions in the chat, please do. Sally's going to very kindly collate those questions and then send them to me when we move on to the questions section. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and read Jane's bio, and then I will welcome her in. So, Jane is a clinical counsellor, teacher, writer, and speaker. Using the modality she created, Loving Heart Connections, she works with clients who are grieving the deaths of their loved ones, as well as those who are struggling in this life and looking for spiritual guidance. Loving Heart Connections provides her clients with peace and the knowledge that leads them to grief relief and the opportunity to live a more spiritual and balanced life. She has written numerous book chapters, articles on grief and loss, as well as co-written books on grief and having loving connections. She maintains the website clearingyoursoul.com, and Jane has also keynoted and spoken at numerous international, national, state, and local conferences. Welcome, Jane. After that, we're absolutely honoured to have you here. Jane trained me to facilitate Loving Heart Connections in September 22. And so I've got to know her fairly well, and I'm really excited to have her as our guest speaker today. So welcome.
Thank you, Alex. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here, Jane. Shall we get started with just talking about what Loving Heart Connections is and how it came about? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'd love to. You're breaking up a little bit for me, so I don't know if it's my internet or not, but I just wanted to let you know, hopefully my internet will hold steady and we won't have any problems with that. But thanks again. I really appreciate being here. It's so fun to be able to talk to folks about Loving Heart Connections. As Alex said, I'm a clinical counselor, and in the States, that's kind of like a psychologist, the same thing. The difference is that at the PhD level, the psychologists use kind of a medical model to treat, and the clinical counselors use more of a mental health model to treat. We both diagnose and all that stuff, but my specialty has always been grieving, working with people who are grieving, and then it kind of narrowed focus down a bit more to parents whose child or children have died. Part of that is because in our area, we're about 40 miles southeast of Cleveland, Ohio, which is right on Lake Erie. And it was an underserved community, both for mental health and especially for people who are grieving. So in starting to kind of work in this way, we started pulling clients in from 5-6 counties away because we were trying to get them the help that they were really looking for. Ended up starting an agency basically for people who were also a specialist in grief, and then started gearing all of my research to mostly parents who were grieving a child or children. The one big part of that, I will get to your question, Alex, but the one
right,
big part of that.
I know you're getting round to it, don't worry.
The one big part of
I can see where you're going.
Thank you. The one big part of that was all research was being done in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s about what the diagnosis might be for parents who were grieving, or what mental health issues they had, or what their biggest complaint was. Well, I'm kind of an optimistic person, so I didn't want to look at all of that. There had been plenty written. I wanted to look at what was positive. What were people finding in working through the death of their child or children? What were they finding that had been helpful? Not what they were finding that wasn't helpful, because that didn't teach us anything. But when I started looking at what they found to be helpful, the biggest factor, the strongest factor came out to be having a connection with their child or children.
Yeah, I've read about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a little bit baffling and sent me down a totally different path from all of the organizations, the international organizations that were looking at this, because again, they weren't looking at any of the positives. And we didn't know how to make connections. We didn't know what to do with that. So I was working with clients doing EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I have been trained on that. It's a very lengthy training with lots of supervision components to it. And it is a trauma-based modality.
Mm.
So I was working every parent who's lost a child in my experience, which is 35 years in the office, is in trauma.
Mm.
They have trauma. There is no way they don't have trauma.
Absolutely.
And many people whose loved ones, other than children, who have crossed over, also have trauma. So it made sense to me to go for the additional training of EMDR, see how it worked, be able to kind of focus on that. And I was working with about 5 parents, actually in 1 week span, that we were all working. I was working with them on trauma. And so I was using the EMDR modality. 3 of those people went into spontaneous connections with their children during the EMDR process. Well, I was baffled. I believed it immediately. I've always been kind of a spiritual person. So I believed exactly what was happening, but I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to continue with that modality or to take a step out of it. I wasn't at that point in time smart enough to just shut up and listen. And if I would have, I would have been further ahead. But I was using my left brain to try to figure out, okay, where do we go with this? Where do we go? How can I be helpful? What needs to happen? And so I started looking it up. Now, this was, a long time ago. So this was like 2000. And started looking at, what was going on, what was written, what was out there. And I found Alan Botkin. Alan Botkin is the kind of creator of induced after death communication, AIDC or IADC, sorry. And so he's in Illinois, which is just 2 states away for me, which didn't make any difference. I would have called him if he was in Timbuktu, but found his phone number and called him up. And I said, this is what's happening. And it seems it's kind of following the IADC protocol, but I'm not doing the IADC protocol. I'm just doing the bilateral starting point of EMDR. And he said, oh, yeah, it happens. And I said, how frequently does this happen? And he said, well, I wouldn't say it's common, but, it happens regularly. And I said, well, then where, if that's kind of working on the trauma of the client, and that's where you're trying to get to, how does it go on? And so we had a little discussion about writing books and selling books and all that kind of stuff. But at any rate, I said, okay, I just need to kind of figure out where I'm going with this. He wasn't very helpful because he didn't know either. And that's not a derogatory statement about him, but he didn't know either. He just knew that he put together the IADC and it worked for people with trauma, what I was finding is that these happenings that were making connections, parents that were making connections with their kiddos, their trauma was really held to a minimum, was really brought down to a level that they could actually deal with.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking, well, now we've got two pieces of the puzzle. Number one, their trauma is lowered. And number two, they're making a connection with their kid, which from my research was what the true piece was going to be.
Mm.
So then I said, okay, now I need to shut up and listen. So started to listen to spirit and started to figure out why these interactions were happening, how these connections were being made through the beginning EMDR process, what I needed to do to capture that, how I needed to turn this into some kind of a protocol so that we could do it when after we explain to somebody, hey, we've got an opportunity to do this, and perhaps you'll have a connection with your child. Are you willing to game? Well, then, of course, we have to do IRB studies and all that kind of stuff in order to get it through the university. I taught for Kent State University for 17 years in the master's and PhD level for clinical counseling. And so I was my research was not owned by them, of course, but I still had to kind of walk that line.
Yeah.
So trying to get that IRB to have them approve it so that nobody was going to be hurt was really hard, and it really slowed down the creation of Loving Heart Connections. But I finally got a protocol together that worked. And then I started, and those 5 clients were my first guinea pigs, by the way. They were wonderful. They were absolutely wonderful. They came back into the office and we did it over and over and over and over again. And we tweaked it and I recorded it so I could really study where they were going. It took almost a year to get it really fine-tuned enough that I had enough confidence that it was going to work with the general public. Well, then COVID hit. So again, it took me about a year to get, when I say us, it's kind of a habit because I work with spirit especially on this. So when I'm saying us, it's because it was very definitely coming in from them. They were helping. And again, if I would have been a little bit more right-brained or at least combination-brained, I think it probably would have come through much quicker. But we're doing some research on it now. Do you want me to go ahead, Alex, or do you want me to let you get there when you get there?
Well, quickly explain the research, Jane, because it seems like you're in the right place at the moment.
Okay. So we're doing some research right now on the modality itself, and we are trying to figure out how it's impacting grief. We know it works. We know it works to make connections. We've gotten lots of information about what's seen on the other side and, how it all works and what the energy factors are and what it feels like and how to open that up more. We've gotten that information, which has been wonderful. But now I'm looking at more of the human side of what's happening to the grief process with somebody who's able to make a connection. And of course, we're using Loving Heart Connections as the base of that research because we have to be able to put it in a way that makes sense for research. We have to have things that independent variables and non-independent variables and so we're using Loving Heart Connection for that base.
So that's a really exciting sort of newer development, isn't it? That's really interesting, Jane, and it's fascinating to know where that will actually go to. I guess some of the people who are sitting here now are wondering, well, what on earth is a session like? And I wonder, can you just explain a little bit what the initial session is like? It's a one and done program, isn't it? So, and I think that's lovely for people.
So I am going to give a bit of an offshoot from that, Alex, as you probably know. So when this kind of came through, and when we got it to a place that it was kind of rigid as a modality needs to be pretty rigid, especially if you're going to be studying the effects of it. Excuse me. So I had a couple of clients that I was working with who just happened to be, all three of them had sons who had died. And this is not an exaggeration, but all three of these women were having major financial problems because of the amount of money that they were spending going to mediums.
Mm-hmm.
There are a plethora of mediums out there, and some of them are mind-blowingly accurate,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them aren't. And we don't have a way to really, I mean, there's no yellow pages that says these are the good mediums. And these
No,
are not.
absolutely.
But they would come back in and say, I don't understand why this isn't helping me anymore. I go to this medium and he'll say to me, oh, it's very sunny. It's a very sunny day where your son is. And he's really enjoying running through the fields and eating apples off the apple tree. And he loved apples. And I know that, but it just wasn't that kind of a connection that I felt like that was holding them, right?
Yeah.
Because of the financial difficulties that they were having, I kind of started getting angry that these lovely, lovely people were being terribly taken advantage of. So when this came through and we got it down to a fine science, I basically told Spirit, I'm not using it unless there is a way for this to be taught at the same time as the experience is happening, for this to be taught to the client, the participant, so that they can use this on their own. And anytime they want to connect with their child, they can do that.
Mm.
And then that's when Spirit came through and said, one and done.
Right.
And they changed the protocol enough so that everything was going to be recorded. Every participant was going to get a copy of that recording, and every part of the modality was going to be the same every single time. So the first couple of years that I was doing this mostly on my own, before I'd really trained anybody, I was rigid, one and done. I will not see you again. You cannot contact me again unless, if you have questions about what we did, that's fine. Email me. I'll answer your questions. I'll do whatever I can, but I'm not seeing you again because this is a one and done. And you should be able to do this on your own. So after a couple of years of being really rigid about that, which is not my finest quality, I did start seeing a few people who just needed help. They just needed a little bit of help to be able to go back through and to kind of know what they needed to know about how to really make this happen for themselves. So what we looked at is what was missing in our protocol so that every first session would be the same.
Right.
And so that's what you're asking. So
Yeah.
what we do is we use a bilateral stimulation. So bilateral stimulation is from EMDR, and I'm not going to go into how that was developed. It's a fascinating story, but it's not about what we're talking about. If you would like to look up how EMDR started, you can look up Dr. Shapiro, and that's SHAIRO, SHARP. I'll have to look it up for you. Dr. Shapiro. And she's written a couple books about EMDR, and she's the one that kind of created this bilateral stimulation. And what she found is that the bilateral stimulation actually allows the left brain and the right brain to work together and kind of opens up a channel between the left brain and the right brain so that for some reason, it calms the central nervous system, it calms the body, it calms the person. So when Bodkin started using bilateral stimulation, he was using it for the same purpose. Now, here in the States, we have something called the National Health Institute, and it would be lovely if they would give us $5 million to put everybody into a PET scan in their brain while we're actually doing the bilateral stimulation so we could actually see what's happening in the brain. But unfortunately, no grant has been approved for that. We don't know exactly how that's happening. Got some information from Spirit about why that's happening. And instead of just opening a channel, it appears that it's actually allowing the left brain and right brain to work together. So instead of being two completely different hemispheres, as you know, the brain is, using bilateral stimulation is allowing that brain to work together and not just going into the executive functioning to try to make sense out of trauma, which is where IADC is. And that's where we diverge with IADC. We're both using bilateral stimulation to start. They're keeping the brains separate, opening that channel from right brain to where all of the misery is into the executive functioning center of the left brain, so the left brain can start to make sense out of it. It's like a car backfires and a military person, goes and hides because they think that there's actually a gun going off. Going into the executive functioning, it can go, wait a minute, I'm in Kent, Ohio, it's 2024, there's not a military action going on here.
Yeah.
So what we need to do, though, is to get that two halves of that brain to work together. And so bilateral stimulation is in that first segment. There are 3 portions to that first segment, all using bilateral stimulation and using a metronome. When we first did it, I have, because I was EMDR, using a lot of EMDR, I have a light bar in my office, and it's really long. It's, way out here, and it has lights that come across, and I can set it with a remote, the color, the speed, and then we also have earphones that go on it that hook into the light bar. So when the light's going to the right, there's a beep in the right ear. When the light's going to the left, there's a beep in the left ear. And COVID killed all that because I couldn't do it on the screen as much as I tried because the screen wasn't big enough to have that full swing. So I had to start. We did this for a while. That didn't work. So what we found out is using a metronome, and it's free. You can download it on your own computer. There are several different apps. I don't know if anybody's here from Australia or not, but the way we do this from the States, and I think, Alex, you probably do too, we use our own phones for the metronome.
Yeah.
And we put it by the speaker of the computer. And so the client or the participant can hear the metronome that we're setting to actually go through that protocol. Does not work in Australia, at least from the States. They have to download their own metronome. And I don't know why. I'm trying to figure this out. I just worked with somebody Friday night also from Australia, and she had to download her own. So no matter what we're doing here as far as Wi-Fi, for some reason, Australia is just not able to pick up the signals from the States, but maybe from UK. I don't know, or maybe Canada. That would be an interesting question. But at any rate, so there are 3 parts of that first segment, all to get that person to be into a very relaxed state. And so we're using bilateral stimulation to go through that 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes to get them into a state of relaxation where they can then rate the sense of relaxation they have. Then we go into the second segment, and the second segment is just seeing, by using that bilateral stimulation, seeing what it is that person notices. Do they hear anything? Do they feel anything? Do they sense anything? Do they taste anything? Do they smell anything? And then there's two parts of that where we're asking that person, because that kind of lets us know as the facilitator, what's their gift. I think everybody has a gift to be able to have this incredible information coming from guidance. And so what is their gift? Oh, I can smell my nana's fresh bread cooking. Okay, well, then we know that we're going to be looking for the olfactory sense, right? Or I can hear, or it feels like somebody tapped me on the shoulder, or I got a really warm, comforting feeling in my body. So, we're looking at that. Then we go into the third segment. And the third segment is really where we want that meeting to happen. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And if I could see the whole gallery, I would ask this question of the whole gallery, but I can't. So I'm just going to throw it out there. And that is, how many of you cringe when you hear the words, use your imagination? That has become a dirty word for lots of people because, well, if I'm just going to imagine this, well, using imagination is opening up that part of the brain. Okay. So we might say, I'd like you to imagine, Alex, that you're sitting in the kitchen with Ellie across from you and you're having breakfast together. And you're going to picture her there at your table, and you're going to be sitting across from her, and you're going to picture her in her favorite clothes, whatever her favorite clothes were, you're going to picture her. And you're going to picture her with her favorite breakfast. Let's say it's tea and toast. And so you're sitting there with her, and then you're going to be very quiet, and you're going to wait for her to speak to you. And we're running that bilateral stimulation, and that client is continuing that. And then usually, right, that loved one speaks.
Yeah.
This is where the imagination stops. And if we had time, and I don't have any idea if we would, I had a little exercise planned to be able to kind of look at imagination, especially if people didn't, kind of are like, cringe, I'm not going to go into the imagination. Because doesn't Allie say things that you would not have any idea, or you would not have planted, you would not have said she was going to say?
And I think this is one of the things that most people are worried about, that when they do something like this, how do they know it's actually their child that's talking? And that's the big question, isn't it? And certainly for me, when I've done these sessions, and also when I've done sessions for other people, one of the key things that I found is that the answers come in incredibly quickly into your head, almost like lightning. It's really, really fast. And when that happens, I'm pretty sure that it's not coming from me. And the other thing is that she says things the way she would say them, not the way that I would say them. She might use vocabulary that she would use. Those are the kinds of signs which tell me that it's Ellie and not me making it up. And also sometimes, as well as hearing them in your head, you sense them being there. And sometimes I know exactly where, if I haven't placed them over the kitchen table having conversation, but I've said they're going to be in the room somewhere, I know exactly where they're sitting. And if my parents come as well, I know where they're sitting too. And it's just a sense thing,
right.
isn't it? Yeah. But it's really interesting.
Yeah. And a lot of times you'll say, now I thought she would be in blue jeans and her favorite blue sweater, but she turned out like in scrubs. Where's that coming from? So you get surprised.
Yeah.
You get surprised by, again, not only just seeing, because there's a lot of people that have trouble with that particular sense, but what is it? Could you smell them? Did they have scent that you can smell? And oftentimes that will change as time goes, that their scent kind of changes. But they'll
I had a client the other day who smelled her son's deodorant for the first time.
Yeah.
Which is really strong, isn't it? So And also,
Yeah,
I've also told people that I've been doing sessions for not to get annoyed if their loved one turns up in clothes that are different to the ones that they've imagined them in. Because
exactly.
again, they've chosen
Exactly.
their own clothes they want to turn up in. You were just imagining that at the beginning. So that's another tell
Yeah,
sign,
yeah,
isn't it? They do turn up in
yeah,
something
right.
different.
Yeah, and I've been using, I don't think I've shared this with you, Alex, but I've been using kind of a help for that rigidity for myself as well. And that is to look at the word decide, right?
Mm,
Decide, suicide, homicide, insecticide, herbicide. It's all the end of. So when you decide something, you're not letting any other kinds of information in. So I
mm.
decided that my child was going to have on blue jeans and her favorite teal sweater. And she did not do that. So, well, it couldn't be her. Then this doesn't work. That couldn't be her.
And in actual fact,
And
it's
that's that.
probably the reverse. It's the reverse. It's more likely to be her if she's put something else on.
Right, right, exactly, exactly, exactly. Then the last segment, the last part of the third segment is having that person, that loved one, that child tell you where you're going to meet them.
Mhm.
Because again, this is supposed to be a one and done, right? That was my guarantee from Spirit that this was going to be a one and done. So I need to make sure that before that session is over, you know where you're going to meet that child. You know where you're going to meet the child. And so I had a client that I worked with, love her, and she said she wanted to meet. We were doing this part of it, and she had a really good session. And she said, well, I know where he's going to want to meet me. He's going to want to meet in the backyard in the fort that he built. And they've had so much fun playing back there. And I know that's where he's going to want to meet me. I know it. I said, okay, well, let's just go through it. Nope, they went to the beach. They went to the beach. It was not a beach she knows. She had never been to this beach. And she said, it just looks like a regular beach. How am I going to know which beach? He showed her a big rock formation. So, at that point in time, it just becomes so cooperative,
Yeah.
with your loved one that you can say, I don't believe this. Why aren't you at the fort? You need to be at the fort. I want to see you at the fort. Nope, you're going to the beach. And
You
so
just
in
have
that
to,
way,
sorry, you just have to go with the flow. And that's part of it, isn't it? Yeah, I know that some of the keys to a successful session are relaxation, setting a clear intention at the beginning. But it's really important to just go with the flow when you're in the session. That's so key.
right.
And let
Let
spirit lead
them,
you. Let spirit lead
I was
you.
just going to say that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, let them lead you. Let
Yeah.
them lead you for
Yeah.
sure. I one of the things that we're kind of experimenting with right now, and Alex and I talked about this yesterday at another meeting that we're in together, and that is seeing whether allowing yourself to get used to using the metronome on your own, will that allow for the session to go smoother? Will it allow you to have more of an opportunity to make these connections within and outside the session as well? So we're just starting to experiment with that. There's a medium in Australia that I've been working with, and she's doing some research there as well. So, you know, for any of you who have your PhD and you've done your dissertation, you know that that's the foundation of the rest of your life. That's the foundation for the rest of the work that you're going to do within your life, right? All the questions that come in, trying to figure out, more information about that particular topic. And so
Mm.
this just keeps opening up. We
Yeah.
just keep getting
It
more, more
it
and
doesn't
more
stay the same.
information all the time.
It doesn't stay the
Mhm.
same. I'm sure
Right.
people would like to know that once they've had a session, how often should they then practice, do you think? What would be your guidance on that in terms of practicing?
Yeah. So Alex is asking the number one question that just gets to my core. And that is, you practice as much as you need to practice for you to get the outcome that you want. We're not seeing, and by we, I'm talking about all the facilitators, we're not seeing the amount of practicing that we would like to see from people. We're not seeing people do this when they get themselves really down and they're in one of those grief bursts and they're just not able to claw their way out of it. It's just like you're in a well and you're underwater and you can't. But this is something we know that works. And so by utilizing it, it really helps. We've set up, and Alex is going to do this too, set up practice sessions in different time zones for people to come together and to do their individual practice, but in a group setting, if that makes sense, over Zoom. So COVID did a lot of really nasty things to us, but boy, being able to work with people all over the world has been a huge bonus. And I,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
if
look at
if
that.
I
Like,
may,
I wouldn't
sorry, Jane.
allow
Yeah, we would never have met.
it.
If I can just jump in there and just say a little bit about the practice sessions that Sally's been very kind and supporting me to run for the Heart Circles community. We're going to do a practice session every other Sunday at 7 p.m. UK time. And we're going to practice for about half an hour. And then what I'd really like is if people want to come back and feedback, that's fine. If people are having the most amazing experience in the world, they can just carry on. Um, but it would be really nice to get some feedback, and also we can help each other then in terms of if anybody's had any problems connecting or any difficulties. Another person I did recently, it was really interesting. She connected in the second section before she'd actually planned the meeting with her son. She started talking to him, and then she was a little bit frightened about doing the third section where she actually set the meeting up to go to her son. She said, well, what if he's not there? What if it's not as good as this bit? And I just said, well, you need to ask questions then. Why is this not as good? And what's going on? And all that kind of thing. And eventually what actually happened was she saw her son, um, and he didn't speak to her, but she remembered what I'd said about asking questions. And so she said, why can I see you and you're not talking to me? And he just said, because your need to see me is greater than your need to talk to me at this moment. And
And he
I
knew that.
yeah, that was
He
just
knew that.
lovely. It was
Yeah.
great. It was great.
So just to piggyback on that for a second. So here I am sitting in my office, big left brain, little right brain, trying to be helpful. And we're going through this EMDR process. And my client goes into this meeting with her child, which of course I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just sitting there watching her, right, do the EMDR process and just becomes hysterical, just crying and just could hardly not sit in the chair, and she was just beside herself. And I'm going, oh my God, she's in the trauma and we're not getting it out. And no, she was talking to her son for the first time in a year and a half. She had not seen him. She was so overwhelmed with the feeling of
Mm.
being able to actually communicate with him, to see him. And he was saying all kinds of stuff that she didn't know, but she needed to hear.
Yeah.
He had a severe brain injury. She had to go through all the medical stuff. He knew about all of that. He said, you did all the right things. When this doctor came in, you said this. I didn't know what was going on. So being able to process that with somebody who's done the modality, that's why we have these practice sessions set up in different time zones so people have the ability to do that. The ones that I kind of do, and I know does this as well, We set up a room, so if anybody's having trouble connecting, we can take them into one of the rooms and be able to kind of work with them to get them on the right track. So the practice sessions are really wonderful to have available.
Yeah. Actually, you've reminded me of something else I wanted to tell everybody, that everybody in the Heart Smiles community who I've done a session for, I can link them to your Facebook for the Loving Hearts community, and then they'll get all the information about your practice groups as well. So that'll be really great. Jane, I'm aware of time. I've got a couple more questions. Are we going for an hour, guys, on this? Because I do want other people to have a chance to put some questions forward. So I've just got one more question, which I think I'm going to pick out of my extremely long list of questions. A lot of people I know struggle to meditate to connect with their loved ones. So is Loving Hearts Connection a good alternative?
Yeah, so I will try not to be so wordy, Alex. The baseline of this is prayer is asking and meditation is listening.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are able to understand, and a lot of times people will say, I use prayer as my meditation. Well, prayer is usually, being thankful, being grateful, and asking for this illness to go away, or let my son come through, or whatever the case may be. Meditation is getting yourself into that relaxed state. Do not let anyone ever tell you that you need to clear your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That is just ridiculous. You can't clear your mind. Most of us can't clear our mind, but somebody who's grieving can absolutely 100% not clear your mind. Don't set yourself up in that frustration pinwheel of trying to clear your mind. So a meditation, being able to use bilateral stimulation, get yourself into that relaxed state, and just listening. If your grocery list comes in, let it go out. Have a paper and pencil in your lap and write down grocery list. If your mind won't stop saying get cheese, then write cheese down. Then let it go, because you've got a record of it. So yeah, meditation in the fact of changing that word to relaxation and listening, that's the key.
Cool. Thank you. I think there's an appetite to have a go at the little exercise you were thinking about. So can we have a go at that now? Would that be all right?
Oh, I don't think we'd be able to get it because I talk too much. Okay. So what I want you to do is to try to get into be as relaxed as you can. So wherever you happen to be sitting, just make sure that you're as relaxed as you can be. Kind of ground your energy. People ground energy in different ways, and it's all okay. It ground from your tailbone, ground from your feet, ground from your heart, doesn't matter. Just kind of get yourself centered, get yourself grounded. And then close your eyes. And open your hands in front of you. And imagine an object that has been placed into your hands. You might see it, you might feel it, you might sense it, you might smell it, you might hear it. And see if you can discern what color that object is. And now imagine that this object is red. And now imagine that it's orange. And now imagine that it's yellow. And now imagine that it's green. And now open your eyes and think of a loved one that has crossed. And shroud them with love and joy. And now close your eyes and hear a knock at your door. And as you open the door, you see that loved one and you embrace them with love and joy. And now invite them to sit thigh to thigh on the couch with you. And ask them to place an object into your hands. And notice what color the object is. And now change the color of that object. And now open your eyes and tell me, were you able to change the color of that object that your loved one put in your hands?
It didn't feel very comfortable when I tried to change it at all.
Usually change its back
Yes,
to whatever
yes,
they
it
wanted
was
you
doing
on.
that. Yeah.
Yep. We can
And
get it to green, but then it goes back. You can get it to
yeah,
blue, but then it goes back. Yeah.
yeah.
That's the difference between imagination that you can do from your mind. I can change it to red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, black, purple with pink polka dots. I can change that. But when my loved one comes and my loved one gives me that object, it's not gonna change because that's not your imagination.
That's really great. I have to admit, before you even said about opening, well, you said you go to the door, there's a knock on the door. I in my head, I'd already got ahead. I'd opened the door. Ellie was there. I'd given a big hug before you'd tell me to embrace her.
Well, many of you probably did, and that's okay.
That's
Yeah,
really
that's
cool.
awesome.
That's really lovely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jane. That's absolutely brilliant. Before we
Oh,
move on to questions, and I feel that we've only really scratched the surface here, really, to be honest. But before we move on to questions, is there anything else that you wanted to say that we haven't yet covered?
yeah, blah, blah, blah. I think I've taken up an awful lot of your time
No,
with
it's fantastic.
background information that you may not be terribly interested in. But I
Oh,
think that
interesting.
somebody may have put the website in clearingyoursoul.com, which will take you to Loving Heart Connections. Sally had actually asked me about the painting that's in the background. And it is actually a soul painting done by an artist in Dublin, Ireland, by the name of Celine Slater. And if you're interested in knowing about soul paintings, you can definitely contact her at Celine. I just opened this up. Let's see. It is, of course, it's artist.celine, Celine @gmail.com. So
Oh,
Sally had suggested I give that information. So I dropping that out for you. But
Fantastic.
no, thank you.
It's really
Oh,
fascinating, Jane. It's great having you here and talking to you. If people have trouble, and there are, I know a couple of members of our community that still have found it really hard to connect, what can we do to help them?
yeah. So the one thing we are looking at this, by the way, for people who do have a hard time connecting. One of the things that we are looking at is the rigidity of what you think needs to happen. When you kind of go into a situation where you say it's only going to be real, same as you would if you were visiting a psychic or a medium, and you said, unless my person says hot potato 3 times in the same sentence, it's not going to be them.
Yeah.
So that's that rigidity factor. So if you're thinking you have to see them in some way, you have to smell them, you have to taste them, you have to do something that you're kind of predetermining, that sends your anxiety way up, and it's very, very difficult to relax, have that relaxation at that point in time. I just in connecting with spirit and the information that we have learned from doing all of these sessions, we don't know of anybody who doesn't want to connect with a loved one. So your kiddos on the other side, your loved ones on the other side, they all want to connect with you. So it is just working through that process, trying to get yourself as relaxed as possible, going through that session, making sure that you are working with your facilitator. Most of them will not charge for subsequent sessions. I have not said that has to be that way. Excuse me, that's the way I've always run my practice.
Yeah.
But working with somebody in a subsequent way to really make it happen, that just kind of working through some of those stumbling blocks is really important. The other thing that we found, and Alex, this is just kind of a periphery thing, but sometimes it does depend on the medications that the person is taking. We've had some folks that have been on pretty heavy doses of antipsychotic medications, and they find it difficult to go through because you're asking your brain to do what the antipsychotic medications are asking you not to do.
Right. Okay. So there's a conflict there.
It doesn't make any difference if your child was on medications when they crossed. That's immaterial.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm just picking up from some of the questions here. Some people have had perhaps a bad experience with EMDR when they've been using it to help them with trauma, and that's making them a little bit hesitant about working with this process. But we're not going to the trauma bit at all, are we, when we're doing a Loving Hearts connection? So it's
we're going to just before that break off with trauma. And then we're going into making connections, and they're going in looking at the trauma.
Yeah,
absolutely true.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Right, so have we got any more questions here? I think Sally's been collating them. Sorry, I'm just having a little look here. There are lots of questions. Somebody says, what if you can't see images in your imagination? I think that links back to what you were talking about previously, Jane, about we all have a gift of, we may hear things rather than see things. So if you can't see images in your imagination, you should be able to tune into a different kind of
and that's the reason. That's the reason why in segment 2, we're asking you to tell us, you, the client, to tell the facilitator, what did you see? What did you feel? What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you sense? And then that allows us to kind of change some of those questions so that instead of saying what color was the object, we can say, what did you sense the object was?
Yes.
What did it feel like to you? Did it feel solid? Did it feel, airy? How did that really work?
And I think that's a really good thing to mention to the facilitator at the beginning. If you do have a problem with an aspect of sensing, then really good to bring that up at the beginning so that it helps the facilitator to work with it.
But okay, but I'm gonna put
Counter
a
that one.
caveat on that. Yes, I agree with you, but I'm gonna put a caveat on that. So a medium that I worked with, she has a neurological disorder, and she said, I don't understand why I'm not getting help with this. And to make a long story short, after a couple of hours, what we discerned is that and she said, I don't need to connect the way you do your connections because I know how to connect. I work with people all the time and I know how to connect. And so what we discerned is that she was connecting out to gather the information out here. But what I had her do is to connect in so that she could get the information that she needs to get with regard to her illness.
Yeah.
And she feels like she got that, but it was a total connection in a different way. So if somebody says, I never see anything, go ahead and try the protocol the way it's written first. And then kind of, what in that segment too, when you're asking them to tell you what they've discerned, then switch it up. But sometimes, again, that rigidity, I can't do this, will cause it not to happen,
Okay.
which is sad.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I just think keep practicing and keep talking to other people who've been practicing too, which hopefully we can do within our group as it
Yeah.
moves forward. Okay.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
a question from Susan here. She's wondering if you've noted a difference in connections for people newly grieving and those further along in their grief. Is there a difference in how they connect?
Okay, so this is a great question, Susan. IADC says you have to be a year down line before you can do the protocol of IADC, but that's because they're working with trauma and they're trying to give the brain enough time to be able to start making that channel across into the executive functioning. We're not doing that. So I have talked to people who have been 3 weeks down line from the death of a child, a death of a loved one, people who have been 15 years down line from the death of a loved one, and I see no difference.
Mm, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And good news. Good news.
I wish I had time to tell one more story.
Go on then. Go on. Tell one more story.
I worked with a woman long time ago, worked with a woman, and I did not know what she was, who she wanted to contact. I never asked that question. I don't care. I don't need to know. I'm not doing the work. You are. And so she was married to an attorney. Her dad was an attorney. Her grandfather was an attorney. So she actually changed her name when she made the appointment because she didn't want me to look anything up. Like I have time to
I
do
know
that
people
anyways,
who've
but
done that. Yeah.
I know, whatever. If that's what they need to do, it's fine with me. It's not going to change anything I'm doing. But at any rate, she had somebody come through to her and she kept saying, I don't see anything. If I saw anything, it would be photographs, and these are old photographs, and this is not who I want to be with. And she was really very boisterous and very rigid. And, I just, kept doing the same line. And so finally I said, so you're telling me that these pictures look like, after a few times, these pictures look like a European village from long ago. And she said, yes. And I said, have you ever been to a village like that? Big sigh. And she says, yes, I lived in small European villages in the northern part of Italy the first 5 years out of college with my first husband. I'm thinking, oh man, she does not want to be anywhere around this guy. And I said, by any chance, is your first husband still in physical body? No, he died that end of that 5 years when we were still in Europe, but I don't want to connect with him. I'm thinking, okay, great. So we went on and she said, look, I need to let this guy needs to get out of here. And I said, well, ask him why he's here. And she did. And he said, because I'm the one bringing your son through. So she didn't want anything to do with him. It had been a long time. She was in a horrible marriage now. This son was not the son of the guy who had died. This was for her present husband. And the other thing this kid said that was super cool, he says, oh, I'm going to be famous. And she said, he's showing me Mount Rushmore. And he's showing me his face. She said, he's not going to be president. He was 24 years old when he died from a allergic reaction to vaping, vape cigarettes, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why does he think he's going to be famous? And she said, we have a bill going through Congress that's going to be named after him to make sure that there's a label on these Juul cigarettes. I went, well,
That's great. That's great. I mean, I'm picking up from here a couple of points. Some people have tried really hard, had a couple of sessions with you, had one with Diana, and then they've even done some IADC with an adult Balkan trained counsellor. And that didn't work for her either. Are there some people that it just doesn't work for?
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I haven't worked with everybody, so
No,
I can't tell you that it doesn't work, that it does work for absolutely everybody. I would say that would be a real outlier of for some reason. And Sally might have much more of a clue on this than I do, but I would say I would go back to that very, very first segment where you're using the bilateral stimulation and just do that. Do that till you can get yourself to a point where you are actually at the level of relaxation, like you're almost falling asleep, but not. So don't do it at bed in the night, in the morning, sit in a chair, have a piece of paper, a notebook in your lap, but do that until you are absolutely available to get into that. What happens sometimes, as you know, Alex, we help people get to that relaxation stage, that state where they are able to listen, and then they're going, okay, I'm there now. So now they can talk. Well, what they do is they back out of that. So being able to stay in that lovely place where you can listen would be my objective.
That's good advice, and I'm sure that's worth a try for those people that are struggling.
Yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope they come along to the practice sessions as well so that I can help them too. I've got a question here from Sally, and I'm aware we're a little bit over time, but I just like to wrap up with a couple more questions. Sally said, "What would you describe what is happening during this process as a shift into a different state of consciousness?"
Yeah, again, Sally, gosh, I wish somebody would give us a lot of money to be able to actually what's going on and look at the brain and be able to discern that. I can guess and tell you that they are opening up like a funnel, right? And so what I see is during this time of this first segment, excuse me, when people are going through that relaxation phase, they're creating their energy system, their head, right, to be the antenna. And then what that's doing is sending that, that torus shape. They're sending that energy all the way around them. So it's kind of bubbling them. And that's making it real easy for that person to actually come in. I think that's what's going on. What are your thoughts on that?
I should just go to unmute, I think.
Yeah, fascinating talk. I'm enjoying everything. That's interesting to hear that. I can only speak for myself here, is I feel it like a shift. I kind of just shift from where I am to there, and it's a smooth movement, and there I am.
Yeah.
And this seems to be like a process from the way you're describing it, is to you're making yourself available for them to come and visit you.
Right, exactly.
And perhaps that's the difference between, maybe with mediumship, you're shifting and you're available to all. Here you're shifting and your loved ones are coming to you, perhaps.
Right.
Wonderful.
It's the same, for me, it's the same feeling as channeling.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Fascinating. Well, oh, it's just so interesting listening to you today, Jane. It's great.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, truly, it is. I got two more questions, I think, and I actually think I could probably answer this. Kit says, could the metronome speed be adjusted, and would that help other people who are finding difficulty connecting to connect? We do work with adjusting the speed if people aren't feeling relaxed enough early, in the initial session. And actually moving all the way through, we can adjust the speed. So far, with the people I've been taking through this process, haven't needed to adjust the speed.
Most people want it adjusted up, and that's doing the exact opposite of what we want them to do. They're saying, I feel better if it's 55. Well, yeah, because that's the way your normal life is. But we're not trying to get you to your normal life. We're trying to get you to slow things down. 35, and according to Spirit, this is accurate information. What we're finding research-wise, 98% of the people connect at 35 beats per minute.
Yeah.
Is a high percentage. That is very significant.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
They're the ones that gave us the first number. I mean, Spirit said 35. So
and Spirit's recently confirmed the 35 is right too, haven't they?
Right,
yeah, I'm
right.
aware of that. Yeah. Okay. Linda asks, does it make a difference to how long people have crossed? For example, if the loved one has been across the veil for a few years, does it make any difference? That's
No.
what I thought. It doesn't make any difference. Yeah.
No, because I mean this gets into the hologram discussion and how we do. I mean, people will say, "Oh, I'm sure they've reincarnated, so they're not going to be available." But there's always a hologram there with your child and the personality and the life they lived, and so they're always available. I don't care if it's 700 years ago or yesterday.
Oh. That's great. And I think this might be my last question. Kathy's asked if you can recommend any meditations that help facilitate the therapy.
What kind of therapy?
Oh, the Loving Hearts connections.
Oh,
and
the Loving Heart connection modality.
Could you have some meditations alongside that would help you when you're doing?
There are some people who have found that the hemisync is been helpful to kind of build that base foundation before you actually go into this. So I think because I've only heard about the usefulness of that, I would say any meditation that you feel brings you, like Sally was saying, to that place where you can kind of call on who it is you want to connect with. There's a lot of stuff out there. I think sometimes some of the meditations, the canned meditations, can be pretty busy. See this, go there, go here, go there. Well, that's not what we're looking for. So you're looking for a meditation that would be just kind of letting your brain start working together. Hemisync is not something I've ever been able to do. It gives me terrible nightmares. No matter when I do it, even if I do it first thing in the morning, that night I'm going to have a terrible nightmare. So, but I know of a lot of people that use Hemisync and love it. So yeah, what works for you is where you want to be.
Cool. And one more question that has sneaked in from Rhonda. Did Spirit come to Jane and give you this information?
When I shut up and stopped being rigid and allowed myself to listen, yeah, they did.
Brilliant. Cool. I think we'll leave it at that, Jane. It has been amazing talking to you today. Thank you for your openness and for all the work you've done in developing this modality for people. It's a great tool for helping us to continue to make memories with our, what I like to say, non-physical children. And I think that's one of the most important things, is being able to continue to make new memories with them. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that we'd probably all like to unmute and thank you as a group now. So if everybody would like to unmute, if Shelley can unmute everybody, and we can all say thank you. Thank you,
Jane.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Amazing.
And you're fun to listen to too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and contact Alex. She can help you out.
Thank you, Alex and Sally.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Jane. That's fun.
Hey, Alex, thanks. That was fun. That was super fun.